What made Roman emperors never worry about the future? You've been living wrong if you haven't learned this from Epictetus. And in the next 3 minutes, you'll understand why Marcus chose silence over arguing. Imagine the city of Rome at sunrise, cobblestone streets, echoing with the steps of merchants, soldiers, and philosophers. In the emperor's private chamber, the world's most powerful man sits quietly with a wax tablet and stylus. He does not write decrees or laws. He writes to himself reminders about anger, about self-control, about the storms of the human soul. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. You may not endure this truth easily, because it means the rage you feel toward others is never truly their fault. The insult, the betrayal, the disrespect. These are sparks, but the fire only grows if you supply the fuel. Anger begins not in them, but in your judgment of them. To accept this is hard, because it forces you to turn the mirror inward. But this is where Stoicism begins, with ownership, not blame. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And to explain why it is so important, we need to start with what seems the simplest: seeing clearly where anger is born. When Marcus faced slander in the Senate, when generals disobeyed, when citizens cursed his name, he returned to the same reminder: anger cannot live without his consent. He did not give it. You too can learn this discipline. When you see anger as your judgment, not their act, the chain that binds you begins to break. You imagine Marcus Aurelius stepping into the forum, the heart of Roman life. Senators gather beneath marble columns, merchants shout their deals, gossip drifts like smoke from every corner. Somewhere among the crowd, a voice rises against him. Mockery, perhaps slander, perhaps the sting of betrayal, whispered in alleys and halls. In that moment, many rulers would rage, summon guards, punish swiftly. But Marcus writes instead in his Meditations, if someone does wrong, the harm is theirs, not yours. For they act in ignorance of the good. This was how he faced insult, not with denial, nor with fire, but with calm recognition. If the criticism was true, he accepted it as correction. If false, it was nothing more than air passing through lips. He understood that insults do not cling unless you choose to carry them. And so the emperor of Rome, surrounded by enemies and rivals, kept his soul undisturbed. You reflect on your own life. Think of the last time someone insulted you. Did the wound come from their words or from your decision to dwell on them? When you grasp at an insult, replaying it in your mind, you hand over your peace to another. The Stoics would tell you, let it pass. If it is true, learn from it. If it is false, let it die on the air. Philosophers debate whether it is truly possible to remain untouched by mockery. Some argue that even the strongest mind feels pain when disrespected. Others insist that with practice the soul can grow beyond it. Marcus's life stands as proof of the latter. He faced betrayal even within his own household, yet his journals reveal no bitterness, only reminders to act justly regardless of others' failings. You imagine him in our time facing a torrent of online insults, endless criticism hurled at leaders. He would not waste a breath in rebuttal. He would turn to his journal, reminding himself that another's tongue cannot command his soul. That lesson waits for you as well. So when the next insult comes, and it will, you can choose. You can flare, lash out, and hand your calm to another. Or you can remember Marcus, emperor, mocked and betrayed, yet serene. His example shows you that insult has no power unless you lend it your own. You picture Epictetus, a man born into slavery, beaten by his master until his body carried pain for the rest of his life. Yet from that life of hardship came the clearest reminder you will ever hear: some things are up to us, and some are not. In those words lies the cure for anger, for no one can truly disturb you if you hold fast to that division. Epictetus endured insults daily, not as emperor, but as servant. Orders barked at him, cruelty thrust upon him, dignity denied him. Still, he discovered a freedom his master could never touch, the freedom of his own judgment. He realized that while his body could be chained, his mind could not. And so he refused to give others power over his peace. His calm was his rebellion, his victory. You reflect on your own life. When someone cuts you off on the road, when a colleague gossips, when a friend disappoints you, your instinct is anger. But ask yourself, are their actions under your control? The answer is always no. Only your response belongs to you. If you tie your happiness to what others do, you are their prisoner. But if you tie it to your own reason, you are free. Scholars debate whether this division is too simple. Life feels interconnected. Your peace surely depends on how others treat you. But the Stoics counter with Epictetus's life itself. He proved that dignity can endure even in chains. If he could find calm in slavery, then you can find calm in irritation. The principle holds: their choices are theirs, your judgment is yours. You recall moments when you tried to control another's behavior, arguing, pleading, demanding only to end, exhausted, angry, and unchanged. Contrast that with the moments when you let go, when you accepted that their actions were theirs to own. In that release, you felt lighter. That is the Stoic secret, not giving up on justice, but giving up the illusion of control. Imagine Epictetus watching you today, scrolling through a storm of opinions online. He would smile gently and say, "None of this belongs to you. Guard only your mind." With that, the fire of anger sputters out because it can no longer find fuel inside you. So you begin to live differently. You watch others act, sometimes well, sometimes poorly, but you no longer bind your peace to their choices. You remember Epictetus: some things are up to us, and some are not. And when you hold that boundary firm, you discover a freedom no insult can ever breach. You walk into the presence of Seneca, the Roman statesman and Stoic, who wrote more about anger than any other. His warning still strikes with force across the centuries: anger is a temporary madness. He did not choose this phrase lightly. To him, rage was not just an emotion, but a form of insanity, a moment when reason fled, when the mind surrendered its command, and when a person became dangerous to themselves and others. Seneca lived close to power, serving as advisor to Nero, an emperor infamous for cruelty. He saw firsthand what unrestrained anger looked like: rulers ordering executions in fits of rage, decisions made in fury that destroyed lives and legacies. Seneca's own survival often depended on restraining the emperor's madness. This sharpened his conviction that anger is never strength, only weakness disguised as fire. You reflect on your own life. Think of moments when anger seized you, when you said words you regretted, when your hands trembled, when you acted against your better nature. Was that strength, or was it the very madness Seneca described? In those moments, you were not in control. You were controlled. The Stoics remind you that true power lies in mastery, not in surrender. Philosophers debate whether anger can ever be useful, whether a spark of it fuels justice, whether it motivates action. Seneca's answer was clear no. He believed anger clouds judgment so completely that it cannot serve reason. Justice fueled by anger becomes vengeance. Action fueled by anger becomes recklessness. He argued that courage, clarity, and compassion are enough. Anger only poisons them. You recall times when you held back instead of lashing out. At first, restraint felt like weakness. Yet later you saw that silence, that pause gave you more strength than any outburst. You remained in control while anger would have left you broken. That is what Seneca meant. Rage is madness, but calm is command. Imagine Seneca whispering in your ear the next time anger rises, "This is madness. Do not let it rule you." His words would slow your breath, cool your mind, steady your judgment. You would see that choosing calm is not denial, but sanity. The refusal to let temporary fire consume lasting reason. So you begin to train yourself differently. When anger stirs, you remind yourself this is madness approaching. You refuse to host it. You let reason hold the throne. And in that choice, you discover a power greater than rage, the power of clarity, the strength of remaining sane when others surrender to fury. You think of the last time anger burned in you, how it felt like the only thing that mattered. Yet now, with Stoic eyes, you begin to see what Marcus Aurelius saw, how quickly everything fades. He wrote in his Meditations, "Consider how swiftly all things are dissolved and resolved, the bodies into the elements, the fame of men into oblivion, and all that is now into what once was. Even the insult that stings today will vanish into dust, forgotten by both the speaker and the hearer." Marcus lived surrounded by turmoil. The Antonine Plague swept through the empire, wars broke out at its frontiers, and critics whispered behind his back. If he had clung to every insult or offense, he would have drowned in bitterness. Instead, he reminded himself that time erases all things. The man who insults you today will one day be gone, just as you will. His words are not eternal. They are smoke on the wind. Why give them eternal weight in your mind? You reflect on your own anger. How many of the things that once consumed you now feel small, almost laughable? The friend who betrayed you years ago, the stranger who disrespected you, the teacher or boss who embarrassed you. Do they still burn as they once did? Time has dissolved them. And if time will erase them anyway, Marcus would ask, why not erase them now by choice through reason? Philosophers still ask whether this perspective risks apathy. If everything fades, why care about anything? But Marcus's writings show the balance. He did not withdraw into indifference. He cared deeply about justice and duty. What he abandoned was pettiness, the illusion that small insults deserved eternal anger. By lifting his vision to the scale of time, he kept his soul free for what mattered. You recall moments when you paused in anger and suddenly saw the horizon of time, that the offense that felt enormous now would be forgotten in a day, a week, a year. That vision cooled your fire faster than any argument. This is the Stoic practice to look past the present heat into the wide calm of eternity. Imagine Marcus in a dark military tent, his empire beset by crisis. He writes not about revenge, not about slander, but about the shortness of life, the inevitability of decay. His reminder to himself becomes a reminder to you: what angers you today will soon be nothing. Let it be nothing now. So you begin to practice this vision. When offense comes, you lift your eyes to time itself. You see how swiftly all things dissolve. And in that perspective, anger shrinks until it disappears. You turn inward and notice how much of your anger comes not from real harm, but from pride. Someone interrupts you, someone ignores you, someone fails to give you the respect you think you deserve, and suddenly your temper flares. Marcus Aurelius warned himself against this trap. Receive without pride, let go without attachment. He knew that ego is fragile, and fragile things are easily broken. Marcus sat on the highest throne in the known world. He was hailed as Augustus Emperor, father of the nation. Yet in his private writings, he constantly stripped away those titles, reminding himself he was only a man of dust and breath. He even wrote, "Soon you will have forgotten everything. Soon everything will have forgotten you." Imagine the ruler of millions training himself to see his own glory as temporary, almost laughable. This humility was his shield. For when pride is absent, insults have nowhere to land. You reflect on your own life. How many times has anger risen, not because of real injury, but because of wounded pride? Someone didn't acknowledge your effort. Someone dismissed your opinion. Someone failed to recognize your worth. These moments sting not because they destroy you, but because they dent your ego. And when your ego rules, your anger follows quickly. Scholars still debate whether humility is strength or weakness. Some argue that pride protects dignity, while others insist it breeds fragility. The Stoics were clear: pride in external titles. Status recognition is weakness because they can be taken. Pride in virtue alone is strength because it depends only on you. Think of Marcus again in the senators, whispering, rivals mocking. A proud emperor might have silenced them with punishment. Marcus instead let them speak, knowing their words could not touch his inner worth. By laying down his ego, he made himself untouchable. You recall moments when you swallowed your pride and stayed calm. At first it felt like losing. But later you realized you had lost nothing. Your peace remained, your dignity intact. That quiet strength outweighed the fleeting satisfaction of anger. So you begin to practice the same. Each time pride rises, you remind yourself, I am dust and breath like everyone else. You loosen your grip on ego, and with it, the grip of anger weakens. For when you no longer demand constant recognition, you cannot be disturbed by its absence. Humility becomes your fortress, and in that fortress, you are finally free. You begin to see anger soften when you look at others with compassion. Marcus Aurelius prepared himself every morning with these words. When you wake up, tell yourself, today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they don't know the difference between good and evil. He knew that most offenses are not born from true malice, but from ignorance, fear, or weakness. And when you see offenders in this light, fury melts into pity, and pity into calm. Marcus had reason to hate. Generals failed him, friends betrayed him, conspiracies formed in the shadows of Rome. Even his own son Commodus grew into the kind of ruler who would unravel much of what Marcus had worked to preserve. Yet in his writings you never find bitterness. Instead, you find reminders to himself to endure, to forgive, to see others not as monsters, but as misguided. You reflect on your own life. When someone cuts you down with words, your instinct is to strike back. But when you later discover their struggles, the stress, the insecurity, the wounds they carry, you realize their cruelty was less about you and more about their own blindness. Compassion does not excuse the offense, but it transforms your response. You no longer see an enemy. You see a fellow human stumbling in darkness. Philosophers debate whether Stoicism truly promotes compassion. Some accuse it of cold endurance, of detachment without empathy. Yet Marcus shows otherwise. He wrote constantly about the unity of humanity, about all people being citizens of the same world. His compassion was not sentimental, but practical. To hate another is to hate part of yourself, for you are all fragments of the same whole. You recall a moment when someone's anger struck you, but you chose not to respond with rage. Instead, you paused, breathed, and reminded yourself they act out of ignorance. That pause gave you freedom. The anger dissolved, not because you ignored the offense, but because you saw the human beneath it. Imagine Marcus walking through a crowded street, hearing insults tossed his way. He does not stiffen, does not lash out. He simply remembers they do not know better. And with that, he remains serene. So you begin to practice this vision. When offense comes, you do not ask, "How dare they?" but "What blindness drives them?" This shift is subtle but powerful. Compassion replaces fury. Understanding replaces pride. And you discover that by softening your view of others, you sharpen your control over yourself. You look again at the irritations of daily life. The person who interrupts you, the rude driver, the colleague who takes credit for your work. Your old instinct is to curse these moments. But Stoicism teaches you to see them as practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Every annoyance becomes training material, every insult an exercise in patience, every obstacle a weight that strengthens the soul. Marcus knew this truth intimately. He spent much of his reign not in comfort, but in military camps, facing endless wars and the constant threat of famine and plague. Yet instead of despairing, he turned these hardships into opportunities for discipline. His meditations are full of reminders to himself that obstacles were not enemies, but teachers. Each setback was proof of his chance to grow in endurance, justice, and humility. You reflect on your own life. When someone bothers you, you tend to think, "Why me, why now?" But what if instead you asked, "What practice is this giving me?" If they insult you, the practice is humility. If they betray you, the practice is forgiveness. If they inconvenience you, the practice is patience. Suddenly, anger no longer makes sense because every irritation is raw material for virtue. Philosophers sometimes debate whether this reframing is a form of denial, whether it ignores real pain by coding it in philosophy. But Marcus's life shows it is more than denial. He did not pretend the plague wasn't killing millions, nor that war wasn't exhausting. He acknowledged the pain, but he refused to let it make him bitter. By naming hardship as practice, he transformed suffering into strength. You recall moments when you bore an insult silently, later realizing that in enduring it, you grew stronger. That small victory gave you more confidence than any outburst would have. This is what the Stoics meant. Life is not against you, it is training you. Picture Marcus riding in his cold tent at the frontier, enemies pressing at Rome's borders. Yet he carves calmly into his tablet, "Obstacles are the way." His words echo through time to you. Your daily annoyances are lighter than his, but they serve the same role to test your virtue, to sharpen your calm. So you begin to welcome them differently. No longer do you see offense as harm. You see it as practice, as exercise, as a chance to grow. And in this shift, anger loses its place because nothing is against you, everything is for your training. You notice the power of silence when provoked. Someone shouts, mocks, or spreads lies, and your old instinct is to rush with words, defend, retaliate, prove yourself. Yet Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself, the best answer to anger is silence. To speak often gives strength to the insult, but silence leaves it to wither. Marcus himself lived surrounded by voices, senators scheming in chambers, soldiers grumbling in camps, crowds restless in the streets. He had the authority to silence them all, yet many times he chose not to. He knew that anger feeds on attention, and silence starves it. When others expected outrage, his calm unsettled them more than any speech could. His silence was not avoidance, but mastery proof that no word could drag him into madness. You reflect on your own life. Think of the arguments that grew worse because you spoke too quickly, the times your reply only deepened the wound. And think of the rare times you held your tongue, the strength of walking away, the dignity of not answering. In those moments, you discovered what Marcus knew: silence is not weakness. It is a shield, and often the most powerful reply. Philosophers still discuss whether silence risks being misunderstood, mistaken for consent or fear. But the Stoics remind you that misunderstanding belongs to others, not to you. What matters is mastery over yourself. If speech is useful, speak calmly. If not, remain silent. Either way, your peace remains intact. You recall when you let someone's insult pass unanswered. At first it stung, your pride wanted to shout back. Yet later you felt stronger, lighter, even victorious. Their words fell like arrows against stone, unable to pierce you. That is the quiet strength silence offers. Imagine Marcus today, faced with a storm of criticism in headlines or online. He would not rage, not rush to reply. He would remain silent, recording only in his journal, "Their words do not harm me, unless I let them." And with that, the storm would pass. So you begin to practice silence. You do not owe the world every response. You owe yourself your peace. And when you refuse to answer anger with anger, you discover a freedom few ever touch, the freedom of being beyond their reach. You arrive at the final vision, a state where anger no longer grips you, where the noise of others cannot disturb your calm. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. These words are not a trick, but the heart of Stoic discipline. They show you that peace is not a gift others can give. It is a choice you make again and again. Marcus lived this choice daily. Surrounded by war, plague, betrayal, even his own son's failings, he refused to surrender his inner freedom. His calm was not born of comfort, but of discipline. He knew he could not control the world, but he could control himself. That was his empire within the empire, the rule over his own mind. You reflect on the journey you have taken through these lessons. You saw anger's spark arise within, judgment not outside. You saw Marcus endure insult without rage, and Epictetus claim freedom even in chains. You heard Seneca warn that rage is madness, and you learned to see time dissolve offense, pride fuel anger, compassion replace fury, obstacles become practice, and silence conquer insult. Each step has led you here to the calm that cannot be shaken. Scholars still debate whether such calm is possible for ordinary people, or only for philosophers and emperors. Yet the Stoics would smile and remind you the path belongs to anyone willing to practice. Even a slave could live free, as Epictetus proved. Even an emperor could live humbly, as Marcus proved. and you too can practice this calm. Imagine walking through tomorrow's irritations, traffic, criticism, betrayal, and feeling the old anger stir. But now you pause, breathe, remember. You see the insult dissolve into nothing. You see the offense shrink in the scale of time. You see your pride soften, compassion awaken, silence strengthen. And with each choice, you find yourself untouchable. So you step into that final state, unshakable calm, a fortress built not of stone, but of reason. The world may rage, others may insult, but you will not be moved. You will never be angry again, not because the world is kind, but because you have learned to govern yourself as Marcus once governed Rome. The pace slows now, and you let the lessons sink deeper. Picture the candlelit chamber of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, writing quietly while Rome sleeps. Outside, soldiers argue, senators plot, the city stirs with noise. Yet inside, his stylus scratches across wax, shaping words of calm reminders that anger has no throne in his soul. You breathe with that image. Each inhale steadies you, each exhale releases a weight. The insults you once carried fall away. The anger you once nurtured fades into silence. You see clearly now others cannot harm your peace unless you invite them in, and you no longer open that door. You recall the truths you've walked through. That anger begins in judgment, not in others. That time erases offenses. That pride makes you fragile while humility makes you untouchable. That compassion disarms fury. That silence can be stronger than reply. That calm is always a choice available in every moment. So you let the world soften in your mind. Tomorrow's challenges will come as they always do. People will insult, betray, misunderstand. But you carry something stronger now, a fortress of reason, a discipline of calm. You are no longer chained to anger. Let your breath deepen your shoulders, relax. The quiet you feel now is the same quiet Marcus carried through storms of war and plague. You rest in it, you guard it, and you know you can return to it whenever you choose. So end this reflection gently with gratitude for the wisdom passed down through centuries. Carry it with you, and remember, no one can make you angry unless you allow it, and you do not allow it anymore.